My name is Daniel Lucas. I am 45 years old. I have been married 16 years to my wife, Valerie. We have 3 boys, Benjamin, Jonathan, and Matthew. We reside in Tucson, Arizona. I am a former Tucson police officer. From 2008 to 2017, I spent about 9.5 years as an officer, 7 of which were assigned to Operations Division Midtown, both in patrol and then also as a community resource officer. The community resource officer was meant to be a liaison between the department and the neighborhood associations and the ward offices, so we were very hands-on with the community and with the leaders in the community. From there, I got the tap to go to the public information office, so I did media relations for a few months during the 2016 election cycle. And from there, we got a new chief. The department was reorganized, and I was sent back out to patrol in Team 4 this time, the east side. While I was there, I was put on loan to the academy for a while, so I was able to be a part of the training of 2 academy classes from officers from all over the state of Arizona. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and as a result of that, I ended up leaving in July of 2017. A couple years ago, my good friend Yen approached me and asked me if I would be a part of a comic book that's designed for kids to help them understand post-traumatic stress, especially when there is a parent involved with that. And I said I would be happy to help and give some input into that. And then the next thing I knew, my family and I were comic book characters. So now we are PTSDad and the super family. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition that occurs in the mind. The best way that I can describe it is our bodies have natural fight or flight responses in them. Those are controlled by areas of the brain like the amygdala and things like that. And what PTSD is when there is a trauma, it can create a neural pathway in your brain that causes you to connect to that fight or flight area of your brain and deal with symptoms like you're there again. Common symptoms of post-traumatic stress are like flashbacks, invasive memories that will come, nightmares, sleeplessness, things like that. It is a dangerous condition to have. Every year, more officers, just talking about police, more officers commit suicide every year than are killed in the line of duty. I think they said every 21 minutes or so a veteran with PTSD kills themselves. So it is a very serious condition, and it can be terminal if it is left untreated. And it's affected my family, and it got to the point for me personally while I was out in patrol. I was having severe chest pains. I was having flashbacks that would just they would disorient me to the point. And it started to become clear that it was no longer safe for me to function in that capacity. And that is the reason why I made the decision to leave the department. In 2009, I was assigned to a sector within Operations Division Midtown that had Tucson Medical Center in it. And so I did a lot of calls at the medical center. Medical personnel are required to report certain types of injuries that could be like domestic violence, gunshot wounds, possible child abuse, things like that. So I investigated countless of these types of things while I was assigned to that sector. I've joked with my wife that I probably spent cumulative months of my life at Tucson Medical Center. In 2009, I had a call involving an 8-year-old boy who was in the emergency room, and the medical staff had been told by the mother and her boyfriend and the people in the home that this child fell down the stairs. Well, when they examined the child's injuries, I believe he had some broken ribs, things like that, the medical staff were saying this did not occur by falling down the stairs. They believed that this child had been injured at the house. When I interviewed the family, they said the same thing. He fell down the stairs. I kicked everybody out of the room. At that time, officers could interview children without their parents in the room. And I told the child that I know what's going on. I will protect you. We'll make it so that this doesn't happen anymore. I just need you to tell me what has happened. And this young boy sat there in his hospital bed and kind of looked down for a minute. And he said, I fell down the stairs. I was fairly new at the time. And I called my sergeant and I said, this is what I got. This is, I know that this guy is hurting this kid. And my sergeant said, can you prove it? And I said, nope. He says, then you have to walk away. So I informed the medical staff. A CPS worker was present in the hospital that particular evening. As we were all disappointed, but legally my hands were tied. As I walked out of the hospital and went into the reception area where the boyfriend was, he jumped up out of his chair and came up, got in my face and said, that's right, bitch, you know I didn't do nothing. And the amount of rage I experienced in that moment is hard to describe, but I maintained my professional bearing, walked out of the hospital, went and wrote my reports and went on with my life. A couple of months later, I was on my way to church. I stopped at a gas station to pick up like mints and drinks or whatever. And while I was there and I was paying for the things that I was purchasing, I looked over at the newspaper, and front page of the newspaper, that young boy had been beaten to death by the boyfriend. I remember picking up the paper. I remember it saying something to the effect of the police and CPS knew and did nothing. So it made a big impression on me. Shortly after that, same year, a few months later, I responded to the hospital. This time there was a drowning involving a 3-year-old boy in our division, and when I arrived at the hospital, they were still trying to resuscitate him with chest compressions and things like that. And unfortunately, they were not able to do so. The mother and the grandmother showed up to the hospital. I provided the death notification for their child. And in incidents like that, the child's body is a crime scene until we know what exactly happened. So an investigation occurred at the house where the drowning occurred, and I sat in the emergency room with this child's body for probably the majority of my shift, 7-8 hours. And I had a child. My oldest son was the same age as this child at that time. And I had a great sergeant. He went and checked on me at the end of the night, and he asked me how I was doing. I said, that really sucked. He's like, are you good? Well, I'm a rookie. Of course I'm good. But as time progressed, I started having nightmares and remembering, this, especially with the drowned kid, his blue veins, his gray skin, his purple lips, the things that I observed on this child, and that started to disturb me. We were told in the department that we needed to, if we had issues like this, to go to to a unit that they have for officers for behavioral things like this. They call it the Behavioral Sciences Unit. I spoke with the doctor. I recounted the story. Said, hey, I'm having nightmares. I'm having these issues. What am I supposed to do? And she said, are you angry? Were you angry as a child? I think maybe you were angry as a child, and maybe some of this is what's causing it. And I was like, hey, I was kind of angry as a child, And she's got 12 years of school, so I went and they assigned me to this therapist, and he asked me what was wrong, and I told him the same story that I just recounted, and we got to the point where the boyfriend stood up and got in my face and said, "That's right, bitch, you know I didn't do nothing." And he said, "And how did that make you feel?" And I told him I felt like fucking ripping his throat out and showing it to him while he gurgled to death. And the therapist was like, "Oh my God, that's terrible. I can't believe that you would say something like that." And I'm like, "Oh, well, he obviously thinks I shouldn't think this way, so I'm not going to say anything else." And I didn't go back for any follow-ups after that. And I swore to myself that I would never go back to another civilian therapist, which turned out to be a mistake. I continued on in my career. I dealt with hundreds and hundreds of incidents, robberies, murders, rapes, child abuses, barricaded subjects, hostage situations, just all kinds of different things over the years. At one point, I was involved in a fight where I broke my hand and had a bone removed from my hand during this particular incident. And so as time went on, it became more and more difficult for me to sleep. But I just sucked it up and drove on and continued to do that. When we get to about 2016, I'm noticing, especially when I'm at the academy and the public information office, that as I'm typing media releases or performance evaluations, that I'm having severe chest pains. And I'm like, this is low stress. What is wrong with me? And it got to the point where I couldn't sleep through the night. And I started having more and more of these flashbacks. I reached out to an organization called the Code 9 Project, which is an organization that created a documentary about officers with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I did the whole, hey, my friend is having issues, what should he do? And is there anyone who he can be connected to in Arizona? And they connected me with an organization out of Phoenix called Post-Incident Stress and Trauma in Law Enforcement. It's called PISTOL. And I sent some emails, played a little bit of phone tag, and finally got a hold of an individual from PISTOL. And he was an ex-narcotics cop, and he gave me a call and was like, basically, what's going on with you? And I was like, oh, my wife, she says I have a temper, and like things like that. And I started hemming and hawing, and then he interrupts me and says, hey, are you sleeping through the night? I'm like, only when I take Benadryl. He's like, are you having invasive thoughts like flashbacks? I'm like, all day, every day. He's like, are you diagnosed with PTSD? I'm like, nope. He's like, have you been to a doctor? I'm like, nope. He's like, why haven't you been to a doctor? And I said, because I'm a cop and I'm a stubborn ass. And he said, do you think you're the only stubborn cop out there? He said, here's what's you're gonna do if you're gonna continue to talk to me. You are gonna have your wife make it a appointment with your primary care doctor, and she's gonna make it because you won't make it if she doesn't. He said, so she's gonna make it, she's gonna know when you're going, she's gonna make sure you go. You're gonna tell your primary care physician this whole story, and when he is diagnosed with you with PTSD, you will call me back. Well, that was on a Sunday night. I had my appointment with my primary care physician on Thursday, May 11th, 2017, told him the story, and that is how I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I had an incident where my wife and mother-in-law were out of town, and I was having lots of trouble with being around kids at a pool. And we actually got our kids swimming lessons because I had so much trouble with that. And while they were gone, my kids wanted to go to their Nana's swimming pool. And I put it off until the last day. The last day I'm in the pool with the 3 boys. The 2 older ones can swim pretty good. The younger one, Matthew, he was just a toddler at the time, splashing around in the low end. or the shallow end. And my wife's mother has a golden retriever, a big old dog, and loves the water and loves his ball that people throw in the water for him. So my other sons were throwing this ball for the golden retriever, and he jumped in the pool and knocked my youngest into the deep end. The next thing that I remember is hearing my oldest son's voice, and at first it sounded like it was underwater, and I heard him saying, "Dad, stop, he didn't mean it, please don't kill him." And when I realized what was happening, I was holding up this golden retriever up off the ground by the throat, and my youngest child was back in the shallows, so I must have got him, but I don't remember doing it. And so I realized what's happening, and the dog is struggling, and so I dropped the dog, and I'm like, everybody out of the pool. I went into the house, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to tell somebody. I got on the phone with an individual who I worked with in Operations East. I told him what had occurred, and he said, dude, you went full primal brain. You just... And it was at that point that I realized, man, if something like that occurs in patrol, I could go to prison. I'm not doing myself, I'm not doing my family, I'm not doing my department any favors by continuing to be out in the field when something like this could happen. So I left the department on July 5th. Of 2017. I spoke to the BSU in that time frame between me being diagnosed and me leaving the department. I told them I had been diagnosed. I asked them what I could do. I was told that I could not be reassigned anywhere other than patrol. I was told that I should try to get on medication for sleeping, and that if I needed to, I could burn sick leave, but I also, if it took more time than my sick leave to get over it, then I might want to think about whether or not I should be a cop anymore. And the individual I spoke with said, I can tell you right now, you're not going to get a medical retirement because the incidents that you're describing that you have derived PTSD from, the law in Arizona currently is that for a psychological condition to be considered a workman's comp issue, it has to be, the law says, unusual, unexpected, and extraordinary. And basically what I was told is that going to the death of a drowned kid or going to a homicide involving a kid or something like that is not unusual, unexpected, or extraordinary for a police officer. And again, I thought they knew better than me, and so the decisions I made were partially based on that information. I did not reach out to very many people at that time. I was ashamed because I work with all these incredibly super courageous, tough, resilient people, and I didn't want anybody to know that I was struggling with it. So I left the department. I continued to have issues. I remember one time I was driving down a street, drove by an apartment complex that years ago I went to, and it was a shots fired call with a family domestic violence issue with a gun. I went into the house with the people as they were clearing the house, came around a corner, went down to the back bedroom. The female was sitting up in her bed with a gunshot wound through her heart, and she was sitting there going, and I watched her take her last breaths. And shortly after that, that's what I saw every day, all day, throughout the night, things like that. I was fortunate with Pistol to be connected with a therapist, and the therapist that I was connected with, she has a husband who is in law enforcement, because we have unique needs. And so I started going to therapy. She's the one that explained to me why I was having panic attacks when I was typing. So she was the one who pointed out to me that your brain has made a paired association between typing and trauma. She worked with me with a process called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I went and got on medications, and there wasn't, when I left the department, anything for first responders in Tucson. Fortunately, with Pistol, we were able to introduce something like that. They're no longer involved in the one in Tucson, but now there is a group for individuals who are first responders with PTSD. And so I started getting treatment. When I was still in the department, after I had learned I had PTSD, I remember I was on a suicide call. The department was woefully understaffed. There was an individual who walked outside his house, shot himself in the head, had left a note in a back bedroom. I was the only officer available to respond. I showed up. My sergeant eventually showed up. I was having so many issues, like I had to turn away because I didn't want my sergeant to see that I was like really struggling on this call. Crime scene came, and I took the weapon that was used in the suicide, and one way that we help prove that it's in fact a suicide is you can see the blowback of the blood and the brain matter and things like that inside the barrel of the gun. And so I'm holding this gun so crime scene can take pictures of the brains inside the pistol, and I was like, you know what? Crap like this is why I have post-traumatic stress disorder. So all of these things culminated. I ended up leaving the department. I found a wonderful organization called the Boulder Crest Foundation, where I went to their Warrior Path program. It was there that I learned about the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is, taking your things that you've struggled with and turning them into something for good. They use the Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. It's a wonderful program. I'm wearing the t-shirt today. And so through much work over the years, my wife and kids and I all did counseling together about how to communicate, giving everyone a voice, giving everyone the ability to talk about how it was affected with them. And because of all of these experiences, I feel like that our family really is a super family. And I feel like that with a lot of families, part of the problem is breaking the barrier of communication. And my hope for this comic book is that this comic book can help families who are experiencing this. It can help them start to have that conversation with each other, to give everyone a voice so that there can be support for everyone in the family. And that is my motivation of why I was a part of this project, and that is my true hope for what is going to happen with this.